Hello. This is actually the book right here, Dr. Gary. There's the story from St. Michael's Episcopal Church. Here's the newer flyer that's actually been done in notarized Republic. Here's the actual letter I sent to President Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the U.S. Justice Department for Civil Rights, the FBI, and Central High School Historical Museum. But as you can see, this is a great deal of information. I plan on getting this notarized Republic as well. Here's the part discussing about the Arkansas Amendment to the Constitution right here, where it says she shall never be made a defendant in any of her courtrooms under no circumstances whatsoever. This law that was passed in 1874 was 100% motivated to strengthen and protect the Jim Crow Act law that was actually a states' rights law. So that law was passed on the state's level. And this is all dealing with states' rights. This is right here, Arkansas, or basically the U.S. Justice Department for Civil Rights. This is actually talking about disability rights right here, which was actually passed in 1957, which, believe me, it does not really matter. It really doesn't. But just to kind of get through this a little bit quicker, here's where it actually talks about the February 1957, the sovereignty law, which talks about basically right here, Oliver Brown, which was 1951, and the decision was actually made in 1954. So if you look right here, 1954, Oliver Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. That is what gave birth to the Arkansas Sovereignty Law, which was meant to replace the Jim Crow Act law. And it did. It 100% replaced it on the state level. There's your governor who did it, Orville Eugene Faubus. So, I mean, here's where I reached out to Arkansas Claims Commission. And remember, because of Orville Eugene Faubus, that's what actually caused the Arkansas crisis, was 100% the Arkansas Sovereignty Law. Here's where they arrested me and threw me in jail. Here's where I contacted the FBI back in 2017. I asked for a Freedom of Information Act. There's the date, 2017. 2018, I spoke to them on 4 different occasions, for a grand total of literally 12 hours to 10 hours. So, I mean, tons of information. Tons. I've not lost anything. Absolutely nothing. Everything's there. Everything. So when I'm telling you, this book, look at that. Now I'm planning on flipping some of these sheets over because some of them have nothing on the back. So I plan on taking the sheet and putting it on the back and make it more like a book. But there is well over 200 pages there. When Matthew finishes writing 250 of the story of what happened to me and him from the videos and information and everything, going back to 2016, dealing with the ACTI students and all the black mold and standing water and all the hazardous living conditions, the fact I've got the moisture testings and the blueprints of the building, and basically also the health department, the Arkansas Health Department, and what they discovered was wrong with the building, which I got that information from you, so those records should still be available. To everything, absolutely everything I've got. The fact I reached out to the appropriate authorities and filed appropriate complaints about what was really going on to the students of ACTI. And yet they threw me in jail and victimized me because they knew they could, because they were hiding behind the Arkansas sovereignty law. They knew there was no way I could sue the state. They knew that they had a kangaroo court system called the Arkansas Claims Commission. And all of this was started by states' rights. And oddly enough, it got started with states' rights dealing with the Emancipation Proclamation. And the Ku Klux Klan was literally started 1 year later after the Emancipation Proclamation, when there was a severe educational crisis in this country after the Civil War. And a lot of older people who were actually fighting in the Civil War were killed. A big, massive population of the United States of American citizens were killed during the Civil War, which led to a very, very serious educational crisis, which is very important because who actually started free papers is a very interesting part of history, because those free papers were very relevant towards the Emancipation Proclamation and the fact when the Declaration of Independence was actually being written, states' rights versus federal rights was the biggest issue during 1780 and during the Declaration of Independence period of time, because they were getting mad about federal rights giving African Americans freedom. And that was a big argument because the states wanted rights to keep slavery, while the federal constitutional rights basically said it was illegal, it was wrong. So they started trying to push for what was called states' rights to elevate basically racism and create laws and stuff to basically suppress and keep people in slavery and segregation. So the Jim Crow Act law was actually created in 1870 to 1872 and was being passed in individual states because it's a states' rights law. And it got up there to basically 1878 was when the final one was done. But Arkansas did an amendment to its constitution of 1874 that said under no circumstances could she ever be made a defendant in any of her courtrooms. That was to protect the Jim Crow Act law, which was later used to protect the Arkansas sovereignty law. So all of this is all connected together. And I know the founding fathers that actually created these godforsaken evil laws. I know their motivation. I know why they did it. Everything. I've got powerful theories based off of physical history and physical evidence to back it up. 100%. And there you go. Right there. And so when Matthew writes that story and also writes down here, there's going to be a part about Native American equality, because in basically 1830 under General Andrew Jackson, they did the Indian Removal Act. That is very, very important to states' rights versus federal rights, and also preventing basically setting free of African slaves and interfering with basically these individual founding fathers that did not like their money being messed with, and they were really agitated at the Native Americans. So in reality, this part's going to be dedicated to that part, which is going to discuss the Trail of Tears, which was actually May 28th of basically 1830. And that led into basically the Civil War was also a big part of that, which also led into, what's it called? The Emancipation Proclamation, which was of 1860 to 1864, which is what led up to the Civil War. That period of time of the Civil War was all about the Emancipation Proclamation, the fact of states' rights versus federal rights, all of that. So that's it, Dr. Gary. I love you.